Hello, Internet. This is Chris McKee with Alamo Music Center in beautiful San Antonio, Texas. We are bringing to you today a beautiful new guitar from Taylor Guitars, and it's part of their new redesigned 600 series. We've done a few other videos from the series, a 614, a 616, and a 618. This is the 612. This is actually the 12 fret version and the first edition of it. We did have in another 612 in the 14 fret that we really wanted to show you a video of, but a good friend of mine snagged it before we had the chance. So lucky him, he's enjoying the guitar. We'll be getting another one in as soon as possible, and we'll bring that video to you when we get a chance. In the meantime, we get to enjoy this gem of a guitar. I'm going to go over the 600 series one more time for those who maybe haven't seen the other videos or aren't familiar with the changes. Taylor has been going through and revamping their lineup one series at a time. Each series that Taylor does basically has a designation of the combination of tone woods that are utilized as well as the aesthetics on the guitar. So for instance, a 500 series is their mahogany guitars with either a spruce, cedar, or mahogany top. It has certain aesthetics that go along with that guitar. The 400 series of Oncol and spruce. The 600 series has always been spruce and maple, or at least for a very, very long time it has. What Taylor has done this year is what they did with the 800 series last year, and that is allow master luthier Andy Powers to go through and redesign Bob's guitars. Now, Bob will readily tell you that Andy's a better builder than he is. That's not to take anything away from Bob. He's brought amazing guitars for a long time. Andy is coming through and he's bringing a certain aesthetic, which definitely I would say has more of a eye toward vintage guitars, and as well as a very informed school of thought when it comes to tone. What he's done with the 600 series, with the maple and spruce guitars, is pretty amazing. So a few things carry over from the 800 series. We'll touch on them briefly. It has a thinner finish, which allows the guitar to resonate more freely. They're utilizing hide glue, which is a protein glue that's derived from animal hide, and that allows certain parts of the guitar to bond together better, which means there's better transfer of tone. They've redesigned the top bracing, which they are calling performance bracing, and it's kind of scalloped, kind of tapered. It's basically just allowing the top to move a bit more freely. I've noticed some more bass response in the guitars that have the performance bracing in there. They're a little bit louder. They're definitely more resonant. In addition to that, they've gone through and changed some of the aesthetics up. On the 600 series, those aesthetics are new ivory inlays on the fretboard. It's got this beautiful ebony binding with ivory purfling around it. Beautiful ivory, abalone, and ebony rosette. They have these nice wood pick guards that we first saw in the 800 series. They were rosewood then, they are ebony now. And then the back and sides, it's still beautiful maple, but if you can see this, they're doing it in this brown sugar stain. Now this is a stain that when I was there at the factory in October, Andy probably spent about 20 minutes talking about, and the long and short of it is they're having to do this by hand because maple's not a very porous wood, and if they don't do it a certain way, one, the finish can't be as thin, so you can't have the color actually in the finish. They're having to apply this to the wood first, and you have to hand rub it to get it to sink in properly, sand out well, and not just look all orangey. Orange is great on a Gretsch, but not the color they're going for here. So this is a beautiful brown sugar color that really brings to mind violins, violas, other stringed instruments that are also a combination of spruce and maple. Some of the bracing changes that are distinct to this series, other than the 800 series, is really the bracing on the back. You'll notice whenever you look in one of these guitars that the bracing never touches the side. In other words, that you have these braces that are thinner, a little taller, and taper off before they reach the side of the guitar. Now the reason for this is very specific to maple as a tone wood. If you think about rosewood guitars tend to have a scooped mid-range with strong bass, strong highs, and kind of a scooped mid-range, and lovely overtones. Well, part of that is because rosewood has a very fast velocity. The vibrations move through the wood, and it creates these overtones that we find lovely, but a luthier has to bear in mind that it's going to create these things and brace accordingly. Otherwise, you'll get too much overtone and kind of a muddy guitar. Maple, in contrast, is a dampening wood. It doesn't have a very fast velocity in comparison to rosewood. And what we have done historically in building guitars is we have taken, at least acoustic flat top guitars, and we have taken a guitar built for spruce and rosewood, thrown maple on it, and say, well, that sounds bright. And the point that Andy's been trying to make to people is, duh. It's not built for maple. We've taken a guitar built for rosewood, used maple on it, and wondered why we get the results that we get. The reason is because it's a different tone wood. It responds differently, so we have to brace for it differently. And that's why the bracing on the back is tapered. It allows the back of the guitar, the maple in this case, to move more freely. And so rather than just being kind of a bright guitar, or what we might just say is a good stage guitar that cuts through the mix, these actually have some luscious tones to them. A good strong low end. It's still very balanced, but it's a fuller sounding guitar that brings more of a smile to the face. I joked on one of the videos that it should be a controlled substance. These are really fantastic guitars. They're earning a lot of fans very, very quickly. This guitar happens to be a first edition, which Taylor's been doing every time they redesign a series. They do a limited number of first edition models. On those guitars, you get a label on the inside of the guitar labeled first edition. You also have the case labeled first edition. On the solid headstock versions of this, there's a headstock inlay that denotes it as a first edition. And then the bracing inside for the top is Adirondack spruce as opposed to Sitka spruce. That's going to give you a little bit more spring response, a little bit more volume out of it. All of the wonderful traits that we expect from Adirondack. And what's great is the first editions are the same price as the regular models. So if you like these guitars, you should move on it as soon as you possibly can, because once the first editions are gone, they're gone. Now, this model specifically, let's deal with some of the attributes of this. This is a grand concert, which is what the 12 denotes in the Taylor product line. This model also happens to be a 12 fret. And when we examine these guitars in relation to other body sizes, we can examine and experience what Paul Reed Smith says that guitars are applied physics instruments. In other words, we can see what the difference in body shape and size due to the sound of the guitar, simply through the size of the guitar. In this particular case, it's a smaller bodied guitar. Taylor often calls this an intimate guitar, and I think that's a very apt description of it. It feels good, it's comfortable. If you get too big of a guy, it might look like a ukulele, but they're really fantastic guitars. Not only are they comfortable, but they respond well to a light touch. So it's a great guitar that you can sit on the couch with. It's a wonderful guitar if you're a person of small stature. But it's also a great guitar if you have a light touch. And I want to kind of describe that. This is going to be your Bill Nye science moment, if you will. This has a small soundboard. If you compare it to other guitars in Taylor's product range, this is the smallest one that they make in their full-size guitars. From this, you go to a Grand Auditorium, and then a Dreadnought, and then a Grand Symphony, and then a Grand Orchestra being the very biggest model. As you move up in size of the guitar, the soundboard gets larger. Now, what that means is that it's going to require more energy applied to the strings, driving the top in order to get more volume. Another way of thinking about it is that a small soundboard like this will respond very, very quickly to a light touch, quicker than a Grand Auditorium, definitely quicker than a Dreadnought, Grand Symphony, or Grand Orchestra model, simply because there's less wood to vibrate. So if you can imagine throwing a small pebble into a pond, you're going to get some small ripples, and it's going to take a long time for those ripples to reach the banks. If you take and you throw that into a bucket of water, you're going to get a quite pronounced response, and it's going to get to the edges very quickly because there's less bodied water to move. To get the same response that a small pebble does in a bucket in the pond, you'd have to throw a larger rock. That's basically what's going on here. The top of these guitars is like your body of water, and every time you strike a string, it sends vibrations through. And the smaller the top, the faster the response, and the more volume you're going to get with a light touch. So all things being equal, if you're a finger picker or you're someone who strums lightly, this is actually going to be a louder guitar than that big jumbo or Dreadnought or something else. Something also unique about this is that it's a 12 fret. Now, on their grand concert guitars, you've got a 1 3/4 inch nut. You've got a 24 7/8 inch scale. So it's a shorter scale than the standard Taylor guitar. In this case, it's also a 12-fret neck. Now, that doesn't mean the scale gets any shorter. It just means that the neck joins at the body at the 12th fret rather than the 14th fret. Because the scale stays the same, that means that everything here moves down. So the bridge is lower down on the top than it would be on a 14-fret guitar. What that means is that your point of physics application, the point of vibrations, hits the top in a different spot. The bracing is different as a result, and you get a more played-in sound. So if you ever pick up a 14th fret and then 12th fret, I generally have a bit more responsiveness, maybe a little bit more bass, low end, lusciousness. It kind of sounds like a guitar that's already been played for about 20 years. You add to that fact that these new maple guitars have a torrefied top where they baked the top kind of to a nice medium rare in order to open up the top a bit. And it's a very, very responsive, nice, lush sounding guitar that's comfortable to play, comfortable to hold. In this case, it's limited in numbers. It's absolutely gorgeous. Did you see this? Look at the flame on this guitar. Now, this isn't by accident. If you see some Grand Symphony and Grand Auditorium guitars and they don't quite look as outlandishly flamed as this, keep this in mind. It's a smaller guitar, which means some really beautiful pieces of wood that are not big enough for larger guitars are available for this thing. So it's not going to be common to see just amazing wood available on a grand concert like this. So the question is, how does it sound? I think it sounds amazing, but we're going to play it for you. A few things to keep in mind. We've had some comments on some of our videos. We're going to be playing this into this Shure mic, so you can hear the acoustic sound of it. We're also recording a direct input through the ES2. Now, the ES2 is a great pickup. We are playing it flat, so you get the actual sound of the pickup. At some point, we'll do an EQ'd version so that you can hear what you can do with one of these pickups. But keep in mind that this is just a flat response out of the pickup into the board so that you can hear kind of what it sounds like through the pickup. And then you are able to craft that from there. So just a note for all of you watching on YouTube. And another note, if you really want to hear how great this guitar sounds, listen to some really good speakers or put on some headphones, because your laptop speakers are not going to cut it and not going to give this great guitar the service it needs. So let's hear what it sounds like.